Inspiring interviews with today's top landlords. This is the Rental Income Podcast. And now, Dan Lane.
I think today we may have one of the most important episodes out of all the shows we've done here on the Rental Income Podcast. My guest today has figured out a system to get his properties paid off really quickly using the cash flow that his rentals generate. I really think that what he's doing is really genius. And I want to figure out exactly how it works because leverage is awesome. I think it's powerful, and I think it's a great way to build your portfolio, and really the only way to do it unless you have a ton of cash laying around. But leverage is risky, and if you're not careful and if you run into some bad luck, leverage can really crush you. So he wants to take that risk out of his portfolio as quickly as possible. So let's take a real quick break. We'll come back in 30 seconds and we'll meet Andrew Holmes from Chicago and figure out what he's doing.
Are you having a hard time finding great investment properties? Unfortunately, the best deals are rarely found locally. Successful investing begins with the right markets. Norada Real Estate provides everything you need to invest in the best deals across the U.S. Our simple, proven system will help you create real wealth and passive monthly cash flow. Get your free copy of the ultimate guide to passive real estate investing at noradarealestate.com/guide. That's NORADA realestate.com/guide.
Andrew, welcome to the podcast. Why don't we start with you telling us a little bit about yourself and how you got started in real estate?
So basically, I got in real estate when I was about 20 years old in college. Some of you guys got Pell Grants and that kind of stuff. I got those instead of buying books. I bought a real estate licensing course, and that was it was a shaky start, but that's kind of how I became a real estate agent. And I did that till the time I was about 32 or 33, and then in 2008 is when I first started basically looking at seriously investing. 2010 is the first time I ever bought 2008 is the first time I ever started doing flips. Okay. And since then, in 2010, we switched to predominantly rentals.
And you've got a real interesting model that you're following, and you just keep on doing this over and over again. Why don't you tell us what the 257 model is?
So basically what 257 simply means is 2 years, a minimum of 5 properties, and get them all paid off in 7 years. So the reason why I feel that way is because I feel everybody in America, and I know it's not realistic, but I feel every investor in America should at least have 5 properties that are paid off and that are paid off quickly, because then basically it secures it secures you for the rest of your life. Basically, you'll never be, you may not be a multimillionaire, but you'll never be broke. You'll at least be financially okay if you do that. And there's a specific formula for that we follow, and that's what we call 257, basically.
Now, right now, I know a lot of our listeners are thinking, well, why would I want to pay off my properties? I want to have debt for as long as I possibly can. I want to take on as much leverage as I can to build up my portfolio. And what you're doing is kind of going against that. Why do you think it's better to not have leverage on your properties? So
I believe in leverage 100%. It's not that I don't believe in leverage. My belief is this, that, how you might have met people who are kind of Depression era kids. I guess, whatever the last financial meltdown, I was never a part of it. I never invested, even though I was selling a lot of houses, because I couldn't justify the prices. Mm-hmm. And everybody who was supposedly a real estate multimillionaire around me, I saw all of them go literally, dead broke. And so and I had always believed this was that you could not defy gravity. Gravity in real estate being that you could not pay any crazy prices and do crazy things and come out okay, because it will catch up with you at some point. And I think that's what leverage is, that yes, you need leverage to build up. There's no question about it. But what I feel this is that first you should secure your future and then borrow more to grow. So the point of 257 is that my belief is that if you need, let's say, 5 properties to live on or 10 properties to live on, how about we secure those, we get them all paid off and put them on the side, and then start doing all kinds of creative, fun things that we can play with. But let's not play with our retirement. Let's not play with securing our future. Securing our future is fairly easy if there is a little bit of discipline applied. I feel that if you apply discipline for the first 5 years and just set those things aside, the rest of the things you can play with. So that's kind of what my belief is, that you need a security blanket. Once the security blanket is taken care of and put to the side, now you can try to basically have all kinds of fun.
So you're almost looking at the 5 properties almost like a base salary. Like that's going to be
a base. Yes. Yeah. I mean, I feel that at least for my needs, now we teach always, or we talk about 257 because it's so simple for people to grasp. I feel my goal initially basically was 15 properties. Mm-hmm. What I felt was in our market, $800 net cash flow after all expenses times 15 puts me at a number where I could very comfortably live. I wouldn't be rich, but then I could very comfortably live pretty well and not have to worry about the rest of my life. So my number was 15. So it's basically you just take the 257 and scale it to a little bit higher number. Mm-hmm. But that's kind of what it is. For most people, the number is going to be somewhere from 8 to 12, 14, 15 properties, maybe 20 in some cases. But once you can get the 257 down, now it's just a matter of scaling it a little bit more.
Well, let's walk through exactly how this would work. So when we're going to get started, we're going to buy our first of the 5 properties. Correct. What are we looking for in that first property?
So when you're buying the first properties, there's some basic tenets, kind of what we follow in terms of investing. Number one, we don't do multi-units, right? Okay. Because what I feel is for small investors, I'm not talking about somebody who's going to go out, raise capital, do all those sorts of things. That's fine if that's something you want to do. But to become basically let's just say to have $1 million to $2 million net worth, for those types of people, what I feel is it's much easier to take small risks and build a quick portfolio. And the way to do that is this. You only look at single family properties that are basically about 1,000 square feet. Ideally, if you don't have a basement, if you don't have a lot of bathrooms, that's better. 3-bedroom, 1 to 1.5 bath. That's the perfect property. The second category being townhouses or small condos without long hallways. What I mean by that is that we call them private entry, single entry condos. Okay. So you have a condo building where you have a door, you turn the key, boom, you're in your unit. You're not going through a long hallway. Mm-hmm. The reason behind that is this, because in most of America, anything where there's a long hallway is like a hotel type of setup in a condo building is tough to sell. Now, Chicago downtown, where is different. New York downtown, some of the pocket areas are very different, but these properties are the easiest to sell. So not only do we want a good rental, we want at some point as exit strategy that is easy to move. And the third type of properties that we focus on is 2 to 4 flats. 2 to 4 flats create a ton of cash flow. The problem is that anytime you get a high concentration of tenants, what will happen is you'll always have more number of calls. So even if per property you make a lot of money, the number of times you have to talk to the tenant is always going to be more in a 2 to 4 flat than it's going to be in a single family house. Sure. That's what we have tracked over a period of time. So our number one goal is a 3-bedroom, 1 to 1.5 bath, small ranch type of property without a basement, because if you don't have a basement in our market, then there's no chance of it flooding. So you get the highest yield on a 3-bedroom, 1 bath type of property. So that's the first thing.
Okay.
When we buy.
And do you want? Okay, go ahead. I'm cutting you off. Go ahead. You're on a roll here.
The second thing I was going to get into was kind of the numbers that we base everything based on. So you were going to say something.
Yeah. So let's get into the numbers. So tell me, do you want a property that's ready to go, or are you looking to buy a property you can fix up?
So for our kind of investing, we always buy properties that need fixing up. The reason is because we can basically do rehab and increase value. Do you have to buy properties that need fix up? No, but you certainly have to look for properties that have value, that have equity in them. And the reason behind that is not because for 257 you don't need that, but for a strategy that we use, which we call the 100% recycle formula, for that you need 25% equity. And the more the equity you buy with, the better investor you are. So our threshold for equity is that after purchase, rehab, and refinance, we need a 25% equity. That's ideal. Now, does it happen every single time? No, but we certainly try to hit that as much as humanly possible.
So give me a target for what you would want to buy the property at, and then how much money you would want to put in it.
So let's say, so a typical property for us is going to be set right now in today's market. Obviously, numbers have gone up in the last 2-3 years, but 75 to 80,000 purchase, about 20,000 rehab, about 5,000 carrying cost, and the value of the property on a conservative refinance appraisal. And that's important. The value on a conservative refinance appraisal is going to be close to 135 to 150.
Okay. And what would that property rent out for in your market?
So in our market, that property would rent out for anywhere from $1,300 to $1,500.
Okay. So
because
go ahead.
In our market, one key thing that might seem like a very high number to some people around the country. The reason our numbers are high is because the taxes on a property like that in our market are going to be $4,000 on a property that you have 100,000 all-in cost. The property's worth maybe if you were going to do a flip, the property's worth 155, 160. On that type of property, the taxes would very easily be $4,000. So a lot of the cash flow that you would get in other markets, you get eaten up in taxes in the Chicago market.
Okay.
We basically purely say that if the property is worth, let's say the property is worth, on a refinance appraisal, 100, you could maybe flip it for 110, 120. We want to be all into that property for 75 to 80.
Okay.
So that's how we look at it, is that what is the full retail value? You go down from the full retail value to a conservative appraisal for a refinance, right? And then you go down further another 20 to 25%. That's the all-in cost that we want to be in.
And then once you get this price, so as far as financing for buying the property, are you using hard money or private money to buy the property, or are you getting a bank loan?
No, we're using private money. I mean, now obviously we have a lot of our own capital, but predominantly we use private money to purchase the property, private money to rehab the property, and then we refinance it. What we always try to tell people is, as much as possible, do a residential refi and do a rate and term refi. That's important to understand, because then you don't need seasoning for the property. So if you buy it with a private money loan, you rehabbed it with a private money loan. Now, when you go to a local commercial lender, or if you go to a residential lender, they're giving you a rate and term refi and not a cash out refi. Okay. That's more technical, right. But for some of you guys, for some of your listeners that are more technical, they'll understand kind of what I'm talking about.
Okay. Now, once you go to the bank, it's hard to get financing after 4 properties. So the first couple of properties are going to be easy. How are you financing the properties when you run into your limit?
So the way to do it is that you don't go to, for the first 4, 5, 6, you can go to a residential lender. They'll give you the loans on it.
Right.
But beyond that, what you need to do is you need to go to a commercial portfolio lender in your local area. And all areas have those. These are not your Wells Fargo or not your Chase. These are going to be your community banks and trusts, the local credit union. A good place for your listeners to go to is called Bauer Financial, Bauer Financial. It's a website that they can go to. And in any state, they can look up who are the small banks in that particular area.
Okay.
And these banks so they do portfolio loans. which is that they don't sell the loan. It's an in-house commercial loan on a residential property. And that's the key thing to understand, because if you go just to the teller at the bank, they're going to push you towards the residential department because they don't know any different. You want to always go and talk to the VP of these small banks, and you basically want to tell them that, hey, I have properties I buy. They're all stabilized properties that are rented out, and I would like to basically do a refinance on them.
Okay.
And as long as there's a lease in place, they will be happy to do it based on after repair value.
Now, most of those commercial loans are going to be 5-year balloons.
Yes.
Okay. So, and that is, I guess, where you want to get the property paid off in 5
Correct.
years.
Correct. Okay. Exactly. So the key philosophy when we started back in 2011 doing rentals was that we were afraid what happens 5 years from now. In 2011, we were thinking that, oh my God, come 2015, come 2016, the rates would jump. And now what do you do with those properties? So what we figured out was that if each property had a cash flow of about $400, $350 to $400 minimum, then you have 5 properties. So what you do is this. Number one, you want to scale as quickly as possible to 5. Then you basically, for each property after you buy and after you set it up as a rental property with a 2-year lease, you take the first 6 months worth of cash flow and you just put it aside in the account. You don't touch it. After the 7th month on from each property, you take one property out of the 5, the one which has the lowest loan balance and has the highest interest rate, and you start attacking that particular property. It's the same exact thing as they teach you to pay off a credit card. It's no different. So what happens is this, that if you're down the road, say 5 years, and suddenly interest rates have jumped to, let's just say 12%. They went from a commercial loan, 5-6% to 12%. Now, if you have, say, 5 properties and 2 of them are completely paid off, what is the risk? Now you have 5 properties that'll cover the payments for 3 properties. So you never have a chance of ever your investments getting into trouble. It's a very conservative way of investing. So now what the reality is, in our case, what happened was come 2015, 2016, nothing went up. The banks were dying for us to re-up the loans. And on some of those properties, we had already paid down a bunch of it. So maybe there was a $5,000, $10,000 loan left. Now you just have tons of equity. So if you want, you can take that equity and just go buy more properties for cash, or just have properties that are completely free and clear.
Now, what about setting aside money for repairs? Is there a certain amount or a percentage that you target to set aside?
So what we do is this. We always take, like I was mentioning, the first 6 months of cash flow on each property, we set aside as a reserve amount of money that just sits in the bank. Mm-hmm. So the way you do this is you take the 6 months from each property and you just have it sitting in the bank. Now, for 5 properties, you have that. So in case something suddenly happens, something breaks, some unseen repairs come up, you always have cash there. And then the way you make these payments, whenever we talk about, taking the extra money and paying it off towards the first property. The way you do that is a lot of times people misunderstand and they think we do that every month. We do not do that every month. What we do always is we collect about 8 months worth of cash flows, and then we make a lump sum payment. Again, we collect 8 months worth of cash flows. And the reason that's done that way is that maybe if you have, let's say, an eviction, maybe if you have unforeseen expenses, you never want to have to dip into your own pocket your rental property. So you're always running a little bit behind. You collect your cash first, you put it aside, you look at your financial situation, and then you make a big chunk of money payment towards whichever loan you're going to pay off. And you always kind of lag that behind. That way you will always have money.
So the 6 months is always going to be there for the repairs.
Always going to be there, correct.
And then once you've got that 6 months built up, then you start working on building up your 8 months for your lump payments, right?
That's correct.
Okay. That's good. And the numbers work out then that making those payments, you should have all of those, all 5 properties paid off in 7 years.
It will. Now, here's what I want to caution everybody is that depending on what market you're in and how you structure and what type of loans you're getting, in some markets, you take some of the, let's say you're down in Phoenix, you're down in some of the markets. If you're in Kansas City, if you're in pretty much middle America, you're not going to have any issue getting this done. Mm-hmm. If you're in Phoenix, just understand you're going to have to play a strategy of 2, 6, 7 to be able to pay off 4 or 5 properties. You're going to have to do a little bit extra because the property prices have already gone up a little bit in terms of thresholds. So you might have to add 1 or 2 properties to be able to pay off, 5 or 6, if that makes any sense.
Yep. Now, would this formula still work if you bought properties? Like, say if you didn't buy properties that needed a rehab, or you didn't want to get involved with that, you wanted to buy a property that was ready to go. Would the numbers still work, or do they break down because there's not as much equity?
Just understand that basically then you're going to have to put money out of pocket. So what I mean by that is this, and some of your investors that have been investing for a while, they will understand this. So my challenge back in 2011 was this. I had capital from doing flips, but if I used that capital and got it stuck into a rental property, then I couldn't do more flips. Mm-hmm. And so at that time, we came up with a formula which is called the 100% money recycle formula. That's the reason why that 25% is so important. So the idea was to buy a rental property, to put money into it, and to refinance it and have equity in it every time when you do that cycle, and still have no money out of pocket stuck in the property.
Right.
Because my challenge was, where do I keep coming up with money every time for down payments?
Right. Okay.
So you can do that on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 properties, but at some point you're going to run out. I mean, today we have close to 160 properties. Where does that money come from? You can't.
Right.
And so to be able to build scale, especially now, if somebody, let's just say, is a professional, does something else for a living, they say, okay, I'm going to put aside 100,000. Can they do 5 properties with that strategy? Put 20% down on each one and do 5 properties? Absolutely, no problem. Mm-hmm. But now, if you say, well, I want to do 8 with the same 100,000. Now, guess what happens? You're going to have to buy properties with more equity. You want to do 10. Now you want to buy properties with even more equity.
Right.
You want to do 100% recycle formula where you don't put any of your money out of pocket and still have equity. And that's the key difference, Dan, I want to point out. A lot of times people will buy properties and say, oh, I didn't have to put any money in. Well, yeah, you basically got owner finance on it, which is fine. But it's not about if you work out great terms on owner finance. What matters is, what is your basis in the property? If your basis is high, then the owner finance doesn't make sense. Then being real creative doesn't make sense. And I think that's where most investors, when they get lost in investing, is that they'll use a strategy, which is great. But what they forget is the most important thing in real estate is that your basis matters, because that is a basis at which you set up the property. And if your basis is not low, then guess what happens? Might as well just buy a property at retail, which is not what we do.
Right. Yeah, Andrew, I really think this is a great strategy, and I hope everyone takes notes or goes back and listens to this episode again, because there is so much information here. One last thing that I want to cover before we wrap things up is just I want to talk about the risk that a lot of investors are taking with commercial loans, with these being loans that in 5 years, the interest rates are going to adjust, and we're in an environment where the rates are probably going to be going up. Do you think that a lot of investors are going to find themselves in trouble if they have commercial loans that are going to be adjusting and they haven't paid them off or paid them down?
I believe so. I think what happens is, a lot of times in real estate, nobody buys properties because they think that these are risky. People buy properties because they feel that they're making a sound investment. It's just that they don't understand what a safe investment is. And that's why people get themselves in trouble. Or the second type of individual is the person who is very euphoric and they don't even think about the risk associated with it. So commercial loans do have risk in it. But if you're taking a loan, let's just say you take a loan for, let's say, $80,000 on 5 properties, right? Now, so you have a total loan of $80,000. So now, if you take 2 of those properties and pay them off, now guess what you have left? Instead of having 5 $80,000 loans, you only have 3 $80,000 loans. Right. So you have a huge amount of leverage. And then one person will say, well, Andrew, but you were just lucky and nothing happened to you. And look at what happened to me was I lost. Well, no, I wasn't lucky. It's just that for the first 5 years, while you were using your cash flow to have fun with, to maybe go buy a Mercedes with those payments or a BMW or just have vacation, I was using those payments to pay off the first 2 or 3 properties or pay them down. And now suddenly it's not luck, it's just paranoia. So I truly believe that to be a good investor, short term, you have to be paranoid. Long term, you have to be optimistic. Yeah. Because if you're not paranoid in the short term, you are bound to make a mistake. But if you're scared in the short term, I think that is what makes a judicious and a good investor. And then in the long term, you have to be an optimist, because if you're not an optimist, you'll never do anything.
Right, right. Well, I love it. And I love your quote that take care of real estate for the first 5 years and it'll take care of you for the rest of your life. I think that's really, really awesome. And I think this is a great strategy you have. And I really hope that some of our listeners will take your knowledge and your information and put it to use, because I really think this is a great way to build wealth. Well, Andrew, if someone wants to learn more about you, what's the best way for someone to find you online?
The best way is they can reach us at chicagorea.org, which is Chicago, REIA, .org, or they can email us at info@chicagorea.org.
If you want to look that up later on, I'll go ahead and put Andrew's contact information on the website. You can find it at rentalincomepodcast.com/episode 106. If this is your first time listening, we have new interviews with inspiring landlords every single Tuesday. Make sure you hit that subscribe button on the podcast app and you will get new episodes delivered to you automatically every single Tuesday. Thank you for listening. My name is Dan Lane, and this has been the Rental Income Podcast.